Greetings. You're listening to Guiding Stars, Evolutionary Astrology Radio. This is your host, Kristin Fontana. Guiding Stars is an interactive, soul-centered astrology talk show using the symbolic language of evolutionary astrology to enlighten and empower you on this journey. Today I have with me David Green, and we are carrying on in this series on finding your natural voice, looking at the phasal relationships between Jupiter and Mercury. And if you are new to this series, we have already reached the third step, and we will do a bit of a review, so don't worry, and allow you to kind of recover some of those steps. But before we get going, I just wanted to let those who are listening know that we do have a website available to learn more about evolutionary astrology, and that is schoolofevolutionaryastrology.com. And there'll be more information at the end of this broadcast for you to access that website if you're interested in learning more about this great work. So I'd just like to welcome David Green back to my show. Welcome back, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
All right. Well, we were on air for maybe, I don't know, David, how long have you been on air with me? At least 15 years, I think.
Yeah.
Doing radio broadcasts at healthylife.net. I was internet radio, and we've now transitioned predominantly over to YouTube and EA Zoom. We do still have one show airing on Healthy Life. Rose Marcus and I do a transit show every month, looking at the transits that are coming for the next month. So if you're interested in checking that show out, feel free to email me. And again, our information will be shown at the end of this broadcast today for finding your natural voice. And Deva, is there anything that you wanted to share or announce before we get going?
Yeah, a couple of things. That there's a relatively new EA book, the newest EA book that came out, called Evolutionary Astrology, and it's just an amazing compilation of a variety of my father's works over the years into one comprehensive book. So in my mind, it's really everything you want to know about EA in one book, which makes it really exciting. And I strongly encourage beginners and advanced, or those who have been studying for a while, to check into it, because again, it's everything you want to know in one book. And also, I would like to, as I usually do, share that there's a call for translators. The school is currently looking for translators to translate various JWG books. It's been also a very exciting time to see the work translated into a number of languages now: Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Dutch. So it's a wonderful way to help the school and also to learn the work. So if interested, please contact me. As Kristin said, the contact information will be at the end of the presentation, and we'll go from there.
All right, wonderful. Linda, can we stop? All right, so we are going to continue along on our journey discussing the phasal relationships between Jupiter and Mercury. But before we get specific, I want to talk to you a little bit about why we look at the phasal relationships between any two planets. Essentially, this image that you're viewing right now, it looks very similar to the zodiac from 0 to 360, except for there's 8 sections instead of 12, like the 12 months of the year are the 12 signs of the zodiac. And this is what we want to call the soul's evolutionary roadmap. This 0 to 360 wheel reflects the principles of evolution, just like the zodiac, and it is really no different than Aries to Pisces. And it's important that you remember this when you're looking at the wheel so it doesn't confuse you, because all of these sections are given new names, all the phases as we call them. So each phase and section is divided into 45 degrees instead of 30 degrees that we see within the zodiac. And the cycle of phases and aspects will tell you what stage of evolution your soul is in relative to the two planets that you'll be looking at, as well as how these two planets operate archetypically. So as a review, to determine the planetary phase that exists between any two planets, you want to use the slower moving planet. In today's show, we're going to look at Jupiter. And you make that the stationary planet, and then you count counterclockwise around the wheel until you reach Mercury. And that will give you the degree of separation between the two planets, and then you can find where that phase exists in your chart. All right, so this point is important because the phasal relationship that you have relative to Jupiter and Mercury is going to tell you how long that your soul has been working on the dynamics that exist between these two energies. Jupiter being the right brain, Mercury the left brain. It's how you think, you communicate, what you intuit, what you believe, what you know to be true, how you express yourself, and themes along these lines. And so up until now, we've discussed the new phase, which is very much an Aries with a little bit of a Taurus thrown in energy. And we moved into this crescent phase, which is more Taurus Gemini in nature. And today is first quarter phase, which will be a combination between Gemini and Cancer. And so I want to do a little bit of a review, Deva. Maybe you can help me kind of go back to the beginning briefly. We do have a little bonus chart for the crescent phase that we wanted to include today because we wished we had shared it last time. It's a very important figure currently in the world. So why don't you kind of go back and just give a little synopsis, new phase into crescent phase, remembering that if your Jupiter and Mercury are separated by 0 to 45 degrees, for example, your Jupiter, we'll put the Jupiter at 0, and anywhere within 40 degrees, if that Mercury comes into play, you're going to have a new phase, Jupiter-Mercury. So let's talk briefly about that before we move all the way forward into the first quarter.
Right, that what we've discussed so far is the new phase and the crescent phase. And when Jupiter Mercury is in a new phase, it operates instinctually. The new phase correlates to a brand new cycle of evolutionary beginning, pulling forwards from the past. So there's very much a sense of almost discovering through speaking, not wanting your voice to be restricted in any way, wanting to think for yourself. So it's very Aryan. It holds a very Aries type of energy, where there's always a feeling of wanting to move forwards, to have enough freedom to say what's on your mind, and so on. When we get to the crescent phase, it's where that Aries movement is consolidating into Taurus, where that movement is slowing down. So at the very end of the new phase, it's shifting from Aries to Taurus. And then when we're in the crescent phase, it's rooting, it's consolidating, it's giving, it's narrowing random action. It's giving what was discovered in the new phase a way to ground, in a way, finding all the ingredients to make a pie. What ingredients do I have? Giving it personal meaning and application. So it's a Taurian energy. Everything is slowing down. It's rooting. It's consolidating. Those who have Jupiter, Mercury in a crescent phase can be very resistant to adopting the values of others, or can be very protective around what they feel their specific message is, not wanting any outside influences or not wanting any extra ingredients, going down to the bare minimum, like what's essential here for my ingredients.
Right, they can be very fixed and stubborn and and really strong-willed, I think, in a good way. Very powerful symbol. I'm learning more and more with this crescent phase, different charts, different people. I'm covering this aspect, and they're clearly here to say something, in a really earth-moving way, I would say. And last time, one of the things that we talked about was the nature of that Taurian archetype within the crescent phase has so much to do with our survival and our resources and, essentially money. And one of the charts that we wanted to include, but we couldn't get to it, that we wanted to share with you today, that is just so much in the news, at least in this country, in the US, is the chart of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is our bonus chart today before we get into first quarter. And she's been recently well known for the Green New Deal. We think of money. When we think of green, we think of the environment. We think of green, right? We think of fertility. And the Green New Deal is a proposed stimulus program that aims to address climate change and economic inequality. And so think about this with a Jupiter-Mercury crescent phase, and she's got Mercury in Libra, right? And so about economic inequality. Ari and I talked a lot about her chart looking at recently, because she's got Chiron in Cancer through our show. But I wanted to weave her in here to look at, how is she using her voice? How is she expressing herself? What is she hell-bent on saying and doing and delivering and not budging on, and willing to take the blows and the judgments and whatever else it is. And so when looking at a Jupiter-Mercury crescent phase, as I shared, it is very much about the bottom line, the money, the finances, what's happening in our environment is very much a Taurian energy as well. Our crescent phase energy is very much about what is occurring in our environment, and what are we going to do about it? How are we going to fix it? How are we going to help it? How are we going to restore balance to Mother Earth? Look at that, Jupiter in Cancer. Crescent phase, Mercury in Libra. How can we bring Mother Earth back into balance? And what I love so much about her story is that she, often reminds people that just a year ago she was a waitress in a taco joint, so not making a lot of money. She was probably rubbing two pennies together to try and make something happen, and working very hard. And so I love that she represents the underdog. She represents the little guy. She gives voice to those that don't have one. But that moon in Aries in the third house, that moon does rule her Jupiter. And the ruler of her Mercury in Libra is Venus in Sag. Of course, that's nature, right? In her 12th house. So any thoughts about her chart, Deva, along the lines of the Green New Deal?
Yeah, the Green New Deal, it's also relative to the natal Pluto being in the 11th, and the North Node being in Aquarius in the second house. We're looking at also the way that she's expressing her natural voice is fundamentally upsetting the system, and having to really stay internally secure. Jupiter being in Cancer in the 7th house, Mercury being in Libra, North Node being in the 2nd, to not pollute or to not allow outside voices from the system itself to try and modify or change or to make it more socially acceptable. It's like the intent is also to preserve the message in all of its intensity. That can be a part of the second house too, especially with the North Node being in the 2nd and Jupiter being in Cancer. It's a rooting or grounding or consolidating into that message with all of it within all of its intensity, in order to almost withstand the social upset or those who are trying to hang on to the status quo. So it requires a deep sense of inner stability and preserving the message at its root level.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. And I love this chart for, kind of balancing the other ones we shared last time.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
wealthy, well-to-do, examples that we had of other women. But the pendulum swings clearly with this soul and this woman. She's definitely here to try and fight for those that again don't have a voice. Look at that moon and Aries in the third house. Just look at that picture of her, even with her red lipstick. That's very much moon and Aries there in the third house. So this is a good chart too to share how we counted these degrees for people again that are learning this. It can be very confusing, and I'm going to share this in just a moment. I want to remind people that your soul will be evolving at different rates depending on the two planets that you're looking at. Of course, Jupiter and Mercury is so much about how you're expressing yourself, finding your natural voice, what it is that you're naturally here to do, to say, to touch, to communicate, to articulate, to think about, to maybe an area of your life that your soul is really learning or needing to expand upon in terms of expanding or deepening into your nature and what that looks like. What does it look like when your nature evolves? And how is that then expressed based on where you've been? So you can see here, and I'm going to go back to this. Actually, let's count. Deva, you want to do the math for me? 30, 60, 82 degrees, is that about?
That's right, you got it.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to this diagram. We're going to put her Jupiter at 0, okay, and we're going to count 82 degrees, and it falls right around this point here. It's about 10 degrees off that quintile. Feels like she's got a quintile, though, I have to say. So remembering, too, that the colors on this wheel, and everybody should have this wheel. If you don't have it, email me or just snip and clip off this screen if you can do that. But this is an incredible wheel because all the colors of the wheel will speak to whether those aspects or the degree marks that you have between those planets are in stress or support or relatively neutral or just not as active, I should say. So the stress is clearly red, prominent, and the blue is going to be angles that support you more so. Things happen with greater ease. And there are specific aspects that occur in the chart that we call primary gates. If your soul has Jupiter, if you have Jupiter and Mercury at specific aspects, it's the conjunctions, the squares, the trines, what am I missing? I know there's more. Conjunctions, squares, trines, semi-squares, sesqui quadrate. These key gates, you can see them in red, and then, of course, the blue aspects would be the sextile and the trine. These specific dates, or gates, I should say, until the evolutionary intent is realized at those gates, you cannot move forward. And these are considered primary lives that you have at those gates relative to what it is that you've come here to say and to do or to discover about yourself and your journey and how you're going to then express it. And so this is again a diagram that will show you, are you at a primary gate or is this a subsidiary life? And in essence, it takes 8 lifetimes to work through the evolutionary intention of these 2 planets in question. At bare minimum, it will take 8 lifetimes, and this all is woven back into the Pluto paradigm. The intentions for your soul. All these other planets are working in concert with Pluto and the paradigm, Pluto and the nodes, rulers of the nodes, and these planetary pairs are giving you further detail about what it is that you've come here to learn, to say, that is rooted back in what it is your soul has come here to do, where you are in terms of your own evolution. So it's important to know if your Jupiter and Mercury are at a primary gate, because it will add more punch and prominence to those aspects, and it'll be asking more from you. So if you have this intuitive hit that you want to learn something, or you want to go take a college course in some direction, or travel to some country, it's important that you follow that pull. All right, so again, this Jupiter for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jupiter, Mercury is about an 82-degree mark, so she's in the red for sure. Feels that way. She's always up against stress. She's always confronting other people, and she's got a good BS meter, I would say, too, along those lines. What does she have in South Node in the 8th house? So wouldn't you know, right?
Right.
I too love that Pluto and Scorpio is trining that Jupiter. That's wonderful. It's in the 11th house. So she's really come here to liberate old models and old ways of being, of doing business, I would say.
Right.
A young woman in an old man's world, I think. So go ahead, Deva. Any more thoughts about this chart?
Oh, and just based on what you're saying too, how she's able to, when she's speaking, she was saying, I just want to be where I can do the greatest good, and if that's, ultimately not in Washington, but she's very open to being wherever she needs to be in order to preserve this message. Looking at this also, the Jupiter or the Pluto being in the 11th, and looking at the North Node also being in Aquarius, it's really not wanting to be tethered into any system that doesn't allow that essential message, or the kind of with the idea of only bringing things to their what's essential with that crescent phase, what's essential here. So she's really not attached to any system, and it's in that way that it's bringing or breaking out of these old paradigms through that Aquarius energy as well, and not bringing anything extra. So it's very you can get that feeling too of the of uh, of the ingenuity, or bring how that can, in and of itself, that orientation can bring about its own change, or has an automatic ability to change older paradigms as well.
Right, exactly. I don't think I shared this. I wanted to add, she gave this deal a name called the Green New Deal, but the name New Deal refers to the public works project undertaken by FDR in response to the Great Depression. So it's not, a new pair of words that she's using. She's trying to remind people, if we don't do something
Right.
soon, it carries a resonance, if you know what I mean. It's through history. And she's got this Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, and Capricorn conjunction opposing that Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is about nature, and that's such a symbol for Jupiter and Cancer being about, Mother Earth, along those lines. And also the gender axis here. Here's this Jupiter and Cancer, this woman who's, fighting for what's natural, right? Give, share, and include. And she's opposing this lineup, right, of all these Capricorn men in suits, essentially. And those planets are squaring her Mars, ruler of the moon and Aries in the 3rd. So she's, really come here to go to battle, for sure. All right. We better move on, because all the new first quarter people are going to be wondering what the show's about. We're going to move to the next phase here. Oops, I didn't mean to go to hymns too quickly. But what I wanted to share and repeat, because I wanted to correct myself, the primary life can be determined when Jupiter or Mercury are either a conjunction, so a conjunction, a semi-square, a square, a trine, a sesqui quadrate, an inconjunct, or an opposition, not the sextile. So I wanted to correct myself. That's a little too easy breezy, I think, probably for a primary gate, a primary life. Okay, so let's move to the next phase, which is first quarter phase. We do have some wonderful examples as well of that. And the first quarter phase is when your Jupiter-Mercury degree of separation is from 90 degrees to 135 degrees. So I want to do a little overview of what it means just to have a first quarter phase energy in general. And then we can move specifically to the Jupiter-Mercury. But Dane Rujar calls this crisis in action, of course, right at the square. It's written right there on your diagram. And at the square, it can be the most difficult. There's a high degree of fear oftentimes, especially when it's right at that point. And fear of failure or fear of being absorbed by the consensus. And you're unconsciously going to be drawing upon what has come before. And so there's a progressive elimination of what has come before throughout the whole cycle. Think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Do you think this is the first life, for example? She's at the crescent phase square. Do you think this is the first life that she's been going to bat for these topics, or fighting for the people? Or definitely not. But so it can be a 2 steps forward, 1 step back experience. And I'm sure she's feeling like a broken record in her soul, for sure. Especially with, she's got a lot of cardinal energy in her chart. Like she probably feels like she's been, has had this message for a long time. So it can feel at that square that it's the past coming back, this cardinal energy. So the original meaning now must be given a new form to operate through in order to be fully actualized. And that makes sense too, I would say, in her context. But even though we're coming into that first quarter, she's right at that square. So, you're wanting to obviously continue forward. The soul's trying to access that trine. When we think about that trine along the way, this is about our destiny, right? Our creative life purpose, really being able to feel like we're finally expressing what it is that we've come here to do. So I know I missed that bicep tile, but it's important to understand when you are sitting at a square and it's highly stressful to have a whole life with that square, that you're also allowing yourself to have the vision of what does that look like when it evolves. How does that creative vision evolve? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the Jupiter, Mercury, first quarter, say, square your entire life if you are working on that aspect, right? We aren't static beings. You're reaching for the blue in this context, right? You're reaching for that energy to back up or to evolve. Trying to clear the hurdle of the square. You don't have to experience the fear your whole life. You can empower yourself knowing how this energy is intended to evolve. So other thoughts, Deva, on that first quarter phase? Because remember, it's Cancer right there. We all know what the IC feels like when we've got a planet crossing into that. It can create a high degree of insecurity.
Right. Well. There can be the insecurity too. I mean, after finding the different hats, it's almost like, how do I gain that inner security to bring out what's on my inside into a form in the external world, so it can trigger an insecurity or a vulnerability of bringing truly what's on the inside into the external world. So it's in terms of that form, finding that external structure, the most perfect hat, and so on, that vulnerability that it ignites. It's really, in a way, it's almost bringing out what has been what has been grounded or rooted, what you've potentially rooted through the crescent phase, and bringing it out, or internalizing it to a self-secure place, so that it can come out in the right form, in a self-secure way. So it can trigger a lot of vulnerability in being able to almost to align with a form, that finding strength in that vulnerability, or the perfect hat can also reflect that vulnerability, and that being the right fit.
Yeah, and I just to get kind of specific with the Jupiter Mercury at that square, and you are going to be vulnerable at that square. At the same time, this is a soul who will instinctually resist or repel information, beliefs, philosophies, etc., that she or he has not decided upon for themselves. So the soul is resistant here to learning that which she or he does not want to learn. And they could become very combative or argumentative in conversation. It would be tough if you're a teacher and you have a student that's got this square and not wanting to pay attention or taking anything you're trying to teach them. And they can be strongly opinionated,
Yes.
I mean, yet this person is destined to attract people that are equally opinionated due to their own inner vibration, because we attract what we emanate. So whatever energy that you've got around your beliefs and what it is that you want to learn or don't want to learn, that by the sheer fact you are emanating that energy, you are going to attract that same energy to challenge what it is that you believe and know to be true for yourself. And so, of course, it's going to create insecurity because you're going to interface with people that are challenging you. And this is all when you think about the Cancer archetype as you come early into first quarter phase. When you think about that, what it feels like to be thrown back on yourself, to take care of yourself, to nurture yourself, to become whole into yourself, to find the confidence to be who you are. And then in this context, to have your own inner security, enough inner security to know what it is that you do believe. And to lean on yourself with that knowing.
Right.
And because at the early square, you may not always feel super confident, right? It's cardinal energy there. You can get really bold and, over bold and really just strong in what you feel about something. And then you will have that step back where you're like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Did I overstep myself here? I overstepped a boundary there. So yeah, definitely opinionated and argumentative potentially there. All right. I'm thinking about, a 7-year-old child again. Because it's the first 7-year square in a Saturn, the Saturn transit for that soul. And you can see them in the classroom. Deva, you work a lot with children. I'm sure you could point them out.
Yes.
The thing too, though, there's a lot of creative tension here because the soul may not yet know how to express what it is that they've come here to do. They don't know how to express their purpose yet. So there's some stress there, right?
Right.
So the square's meant to move you, though. The original meaning set out there in the new phase must be given now new form to operate through. Or new phase and crescent phase, right? It's evolving, so now it has to have new form to operate through. And this square is meant to move you. Crisis in action. All right, again, if someone has the first quarter trine aspect right there at 120 degrees, they're now ready to create a reality that reflects their original purpose. And they can do it in a big way, a big Leonian way. And their voice is heard loud and clear. This can also be an international aspect. Jupiter connects to international cultures. And so it could be like a musician or an artist that is well known all around the world. Something like that. All right, any last thoughts before we get into some more examples here?
The crisis too, especially coming from the square leading to the trine, it's almost like that there's a progressive inner security that's happening through the voice or through being able to articulate what one's message is, what one's purpose is, progressively being able to internalize or to bring out what they're internalizing in a way that's secure, so that by the time you reach the trine, it can be heard loud and clear. It's like an integration point. That trine can be an integration point, or there's it's like the stress is pushing you towards the trine, as you were saying, and specific to Jupiter and Mercury, that the way that the soul then communicates, or their natural voice, can spark through natural law, being heard across international. It can align with truths that can be heard internationally, but it's coming out in ways that it's almost like you can't help but hear the soul when it reaches the trine.
Well, that would be like a universal truth, right? Like when you're speaking, in truths that are natural for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And through that trine, you're really able to express really what any natural soul would want to hear or experience or receive. There's a way
Right.
of being able to communicate that crosses country lines, that's
Yes.
cross-cultural, universal truths,
Right.
that allows you to do
Exactly.
it with greater ease and less rebellion, right?
Right.
And
Less
that,
combativeness.
right, but many cultures, like, I can think of a lot of different musicians that are popular in every country. I mean, they may not have this aspect, they may have something else in this nice, beautiful first quarter trine, but
Right.
anyway, yeah, that's how that manifests. So
Right.
let's dive in. Let's go to this next chart. Adam Lambert, you go ahead and take this.
Okay. Yeah, in Adam Lambert's chart, he has Pluto being in Libra in the first house. He has South Node being in Capricorn in the fourth house, also conjunct Venus. North Node being in Cancer in the 10th. And Jupiter Mercury then. Jupiter is in Scorpio, being in the second house, and Mercury is then at 14 degrees in the fifth house, in Aquarius. So looking at this in terms of uh, how he's going to express his natural voice, what he's going to find his voice through, in essence, is a sense of empowering those who have either not fitted the mold, who are trying to break into themselves, who are trying to break out, who have perhaps experienced being thrown back on themselves, or having to take risks in order to do that, or knowing that you have to challenge that sense of security in order to really break into yourself. So looking at this Mercury in Aquarius in the fifth, and Jupiter being in Scorpio in the second, it's empowering through giving a value to what's unique and different. Seeing Mercury being in Aquarius. So it's really motivating or empowering those in a sense, put it all on the line. There's a feeling of that, uh, not taking the safe road, and finding value in what's different or unique. So that could come through doing art in a different way than what's expected. Seeing the Pluto being in Libra in the first house, also seeing Mercury South Node being in Capricorn, conjunct Venus. Remembering one of his hit songs, "What do you want from me?" And it's all about those expectations, or it's all about not being able to essentially repress himself. And one of his quotes that he was talking about in terms of American Idol, he said one of a big turning point for him, or a pivotal point, was knowing that he wasn't going to tailor himself to accommodate American Idol, knowing he was going to go out there as himself, and it might not work out.
Yeah.
And he said that was fine, that he wasn't gonna adapt. He was gonna go out there solely as himself, and he was gonna let the chips fall where they may. And in that way, he wanted to empower others who are also wanting to break into themselves, to kind of come out in a sense, to find the inner security to withstand whatever quote unquote judgments, or I don't know if consequence is too strong a word, but there are always consequences when you make choices like that. And so it's being able to withstand whatever you need to withstand in order to bring out what's unique, or being yourself and letting the chips fall where they may. And he became he's becoming now more of a spokesperson, or more of an advocate for those who are breaking into themselves, or for those who have experienced the trauma of being socially isolated, or judged, or ostracized, and becoming an advocate for those who are trying to break into themselves in this way. And the seeds were kind of set for that on American Idol when he reached out to one of the youngest contestants. I think it was Allison, and she reported that he became like her big brother, looking at the nodal axis. Seeing how he really was encouraging her not to give into those pressures, as deep as they were, or as strong as they were, and to just go out there and put it all on the line, and it ends up where it does. And looking at the natal chart, the Pluto is squaring this nodal axis, so it's recovery of a skip step in terms of being able to integrate, or being able to recover places where perhaps he did hold himself back due to expectations, or at other times didn't quite make that leap to break out, or to come out of what others were expecting, perhaps due to responsibilities. Capricorn energy can feel responsibility very heavily, but being able to embrace whatever happened, to come out of himself, and finding his natural voice through becoming a resource for others, Jupiter in the second, and empowering those who want to break into themselves in that way. He also has that moon in Aries um, in the seventh house, so he speaks very much to the principle of equality, giving, sharing, and inclusion, and social justice.
I wanted to share something here that was great. Thank you, Deva. Remember, just prior to putting up his chart, we were speaking about how, just the goal as we look forward to our purpose and how we're going to creatively express ourselves through the trine. We can't look at just two planets and tell the whole story clearly. We've got Jupiter, Mercury in the first quarter square. Of course, how you expressed or described his life is perfectly Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, right? With that square to Jupiter. But that same Mercury is trining his Mars. So this is why, this is another planetary pair. It's in a first quarter trine. So while he has the Jupiter Mercury square, which is like, I have my opinions, I'm going to challenge, this is my truth, I'm going to rebel if you try and make me conform. And then you've got the Mercury trine Mars that gives him the confidence and the courage, to fight for what feels fair and just and balanced for him.
Right.
Balance for him, And so we've got to look at the chart in terms of what's in stress, what's in support, and just blending it all together. So just looking at one planet right there tells a story, a strong story relative to that Pluto square the nodes, and how he's going to use these energies to help recover the skip step. It is a waning square. It's pulling out of the square, right? And we also have Pluto and Saturn balsamic. So that Saturn rules the south node in Capricorn with Venus in Capricorn. Venus rules that Pluto and Saturn in Libra and Mars. Wow. It's an old theme that's been trying to culminate. And here he was on this grand stage, and I feel was really able to culminate it there.
Absolutely.
Saying, I am not going to conform. I'm done with, following somebody else's idea. I'm done with the projections, the judgments. You can, do what you want with me or it, but I'm going to become my own inner authority now, and I'm going to express myself how I wish, and that North Node in Cancer in the 10th house is a big part of that. With the moon in Aries in the 7th, trining Uranus in the 2nd. Sag, just being natural, balancing both sides of gender too within all of that. All right, that was a great one. Any last thoughts on him?
Two, watching his interaction in terms of what you were sharing, how that first quarter phase with Mercury, Jupiter can come out as a rebellion that you could see that when the judges would give their feedback, he was just content if he felt he was being himself. And at
I
times,
remember that.
he was able to say so. He was able to say, well, that was my honest interpretation of the song. So thank you for your feedback. But I have to say also that that was that was Adam doing that song. So that's
Right.
kind of where it ended. And I was like, very, but seeing what you were sharing and seeing that dynamic and then linking that to the Mercury Mars, he didn't shy away from saying that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So even though there's an insecurity at that square, Mars is so well aspected.
Mm-hmm.
Also seeing the inconjunct Chiron, the wound that's existed around worrying about what people thought of him in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not worth it anymore. Right?
Right.
Who cares?
Exactly.
And so that was great. I didn't realize it when we were talking about him initially that trine would show up so beautifully to help support clearing that hurdle for him. Great example. All right, let's move along. Jewel, first quarter square, another musician.
Yeah, and she has the same. She also has Pluto in the first house. She has the South Node being in Gemini in the ninth house, conjunct Mercury, and also the Moon. The North Node being in Sagittarius in the third house, and Jupiter then is in Pisces in the sixth house, making a first quarter square to the Mercury. And in this case, Jupiter also squares the nodes. So there's a lot going on in terms of, I almost feel like because there's a skip step, that there is a recovery of a natural message, or there's a recovery of a truth that she may have not honestly communicated in the past. And it's coming through the music, or uh, um, it's coming through her writing, it's coming through her lyrics, seeing how it's the South Node being in Gemini and also Mercury. But with Jupiter being in Pisces in the sixth, and Mercury being in Gemini in the ninth, it's very much communicating how to preserve one's spirit, right? So how to become intact, or uh, how to become complete. Pisces can very much want a feeling of keeping one's spirit intact, and one of her quotes that I think really beautifully illustrates that is, for me, it's all about keeping my spirit intact. There's no point in doing this work. So it's like she's trying to recover a part of her voice that wasn't wasn't honestly communicated in the past. Looking at the Gemini ninth house, so overcoming paradoxes. A lot of the times too, or when you see the archetype, when you see the signs on their opposite houses, Gemini in the ninth, Pisces in the sixth, you're looking at the nature of paradox. So it's like recovering this perhaps dual nature, or recovering these places of paradoxes, and through the work that she's doing in order to preserve her spirit. And another beautiful quote she has, which to me makes me think of Mercury being in the ninth and also South Node in the ninth, and Jupiter being in Pisces, is she says, nature reminds me that we never truly lose our innocence. We must maintain it in order to regain it. Nature being ninth house and Jupiter being in Pisces. So the alignment with natural law, and that being a way to heal, or to have clarity around your natural voice. to regain it, and how we never really, we have to maintain our innocence to regain it, but we never really lose it.
I love that. It's kind of like along the same lines of, you know, along the same lines of, you can't, you can, I'm trying to think of the exact expression, but you can't steal my soul, you can't take my soul. You can, you can throw me on the ground, you can beat me up, you can, it's this whole idea of that the soul is this timeless energy that
Yeah.
restores. Nothing can touch it. You can't steal my soul. I'm just trying to think of an example that precedes that. So, but I get what you're saying, and she's trying to help people return to the innocence of their own soul. No matter what's happened to them, no one can take the root of who they are away from them. Right? Nobody
Exactly.
can take the essence away from them. And it makes me think of something that, um, when we think about the past, we all have a past. We all have lifetimes where we may have been persecuted or emotionally destroyed on some level, and it might be our job, or the goal is to recover our power to, brush ourselves up and stand up again and continue to journey on no matter what. And ultimately, while we cannot erase the past or the memories of the past, we can change our orientation to what happened, and we can return to the power and the root of who we are, the essence of who we are, and it is where that innocence lives and exists. It's that Piscean energy that is part of the water trine. So I love that quote. It's really beautiful.
Mm.
Uh, Now, do you have any other good lyrics? I know you do. You must. I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah. I mean, I also wanted to share a story in terms of her journey with maintaining her voice. Is her first album, Pieces of You. She liked, she personally felt that she was being very authentic, and liked the way that her voice was coming through. Look with this on the Mercury on the south node, and Jupiter square the nodal axis. And then she started getting involved with a singing coach, and the coach said, "You sound too much like a little girl." and, and he started coaching her to try and make her voice sound a little more mature, but it was taking away that quality of innocence, and she rebelled against it. Seeing
mm-hmm.
that Jupiter Mercury in the first quarter, she rebelled against that kind of input. And but see the crisis in action that then happened too, because she went through a personal metamorphosis around how to maintain her music. Then, what direction does she want to take it? And it always centered back to that innocence.
Oh, I love
It
that.
always, so just in terms of that first quarter, and the input, and then her response was essentially
Rebelling.
no. Yeah.
But I love that too, because she's got Pluto in a disseminating square to Saturn in Cancer, and that Mars is in Cancer, which rules the Venus in Aries. All about her inner relationship to herself, which the Cancer archetype is this really young, emotional energy, really. And maybe there's something about that youth, that innocence, being young again, that her soul is trying to recover
Yeah.
on that level. And so the Pluto disseminating square, so she's got already the Jupiter square to Mercury. Is it a first quarter square? Sorry. And then she's got the disseminating square of Pluto to Saturn. So, of course, she's not going to back down if she wants things to go a certain way. I mean, she's going to challenge these other people's ideas. Looking at her chart further, she does have Pluto trining her sun in the 8th house. That's very empowering,
Mm.
right? With her voice, it gives her a lot of power. And Venus trining her north node, Venus in the 7th, trining her north node in the 3rd house in Sagittarius. Again, kind of like Adam Lambert, this is what's true for me. This is what feels natural to me. And I
Yeah.
don't want to bend for somebody else just
That's
because you think I should,
that exactly. And there's such a beautiful song lyric that she has too about liberating liberating from fear, or liberating from exactly that dynamic that you were speaking to. It's it says, in their voices was only the sound of freedom. No longer lend yourself to that which you'd like to be free from.
Yeah. Venus and Aries. Yep.
So I mean, it speaks very beautifully. Yeah, exactly. To I'm not going to do it because you think I should. And the liberation, looking at Uranus also opposing Venus, the breaking free aspect, or being able to throwing something off, and finding your freedom in that.
Yeah. Totally. Wow, this is definitely a prominent life for her in terms of expressing herself and saying what she wants to say in the way that she needs to say it. And you can see that too. The nodal axis, or the stationary. The nodes are stationary. It's like an exclamation point. And whenever we see Gemini in a Sag house, or Sag in a Gemini house, it really is about being able to express in many ways what it is that is true for you, no matter what anybody wants to do with it or do about it. I'm pretty sure her mom also, wasn't her mom a single mom and they lived like in a trailer or something? Weren't they very poor?
Oh yeah, she was essentially living in poverty almost throughout her whole childhood. She says that she was singing in coffee shops on the street, but that theme, yeah, of having the bare minimum.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can see that even initially with Jupiter in the sixth, the ruler of her north node, and the Saturn in Cancer on the midheaven. The mother was the mother and the father, right?
Right.
Squaring that Pluto. So that Pluto rules the second house, the resources. All right. So she's got Jupiter, Mercury, first quarter square, and we are going to move to our next example, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Amma. This is supposed to say first quarter trine. We'll have to correct this. I believe, yes. And so Amma is if you don't know, most people do know of Amma. She's considered, Amma means mother in India and South Asia. She's been recognized as an incarnation of the mother's universal consciousness. An experience with her has been described as physical contact with the Divine Mother herself. And this is a quote from her. She says, "I'm here in this age, the fourth age, to restore the individual powers of the soul and to lift the consciousness in every being." So her Mercury obviously is conjunct her Neptune. And when I was looking at her chart, Jupiter and Gemini in the 8th house, Gemini does connect to India, by the way, through geodetics. And Jupiter is forming, it's a first quarter trine. Again, don't get confused by that symbol that says square. And it reminded me of a country song. I think it's called "When You Say Nothing at All." You do it best when you say nothing at all. And, whether it's a smile and a hug is basically, people stand in line for hours to get a hug from Amma. And her smile just lights up a room. And of course they do kirtan and they're singing. And I'm not sure if she speaks at all in these sessions now, but I had seen her a few times and it was really just about being in her presence. Again, you say it best when you say nothing at all. And you can see that with Jupiter and Gemini in the 8th, forming that first quarter trine to Mercury, Neptune, Saturn in the 12th, right? There's this silence about it. It's like a spiritual silence where everything opens up, right? The walls come down, and she is communicating to you with her soul, with her spirit, with her desire for, love and peace, and to give and to share and to bring people together in this kind of space and have for everybody to benefit by by the energy that's in place there. And just kind of take that energy and share it with others. The big part of her message. And one thing that I remember, I'm blanking on the name of the documentary on her life, but if you Google it, you can find it, is that when she was young, her parents thought she was crazy. She used to kind of rock in samadhi because she's so evolved. She would just rock in this ecstatic state of meditation. And so you can see, of course, with Moon in Taurus, 29 degrees, that she felt very much alone, right, on Earth in terms of getting that nurturing. And the people thinking she was crazy really connects to the Neptune, Saturn, and Libra, squaring Uranus and Cancer. That Uranus rules her north node in Aquarius. So not feeling connected to her family of origin because she was so much more evolved. She instantly had to be able to learn how to access the Heavenly Mother and the God within her, the goddess within her, and then to be a teacher to share with others how to experience that for themselves. And, song is a big part of her, the ceremony and the time that you have there. Again, the kirtan. It's all about music and connection through universal methods. And music and a song is a way for us all to communicate, to feel like we are on the same page together. So anything you see there, Deva?
I would also say too, it's almost too like it's allowing for no misunderstandings, or it cuts through the duplicitous or the misunderstandings or the superfluous that words can hold. Seeing the Gemini in the 8th, making also that trine to the 12th, Mercury to the 12th, there's no room for words to misunderstand or to do harm or any of that. It's allowing that energy that you were speaking of to create transformation. In a way, it's something that's larger than something.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, along those same lines, I see this as a soul who's just really plugged into a higher message, a spiritual message, again, a universal message, but something very much rooted in God, which is, and of course, you've got Neptune and Mercury balsamic here. You've got Venus, the ruler of her Mercury in Libra, balsamic to Mars. And so, she's really come full circle in her own journey, evolutionarily speaking, spiritually speaking. It's interesting to see Pluto in a new phase with Venus and Mars. And in Virgo, the Venus and Mars are in Virgo. You see everything up in the 10th house. While there's this very grand stage because she's, goes all over the world, there's what she brings is a message of keeping things simple, right? And of sharing what you have with others. And that love is eternal, and you can't put a price on it. It's all about the heart for her. And she hands out chocolate kisses as well, usually. After she hugs you, you get a chocolate kiss. It's really so South Node and Leo there, isn't it?
Oh, and seeing there too that that may one part of it may have been facilitated through loss or through trauma. Seeing Uranus on the South Node, and it's almost like a heart expansion happened, or it opened her up to receiving that, or to being able to access that. It's like letting go of that, perhaps only the earthly love or only the attachment. But it's like a heart expansion into the universal. It's through loss.
Yeah, I mean, that has to happen when you've reached it. Gosh, this is a good thing to bring up. I remember your dad used to tell stories, and at the schools, and we would go over, different charts and different stages of evolution. And just because somebody's more evolved or a soul is more evolved does not mean that it gets easier. In many ways, it can get harder. And the teachings, well, consistently become teachings that connect directly to the emotional body, since this is how the soul evolves, to not attach to anything on earth, whether or to have expectations or anything, whether it's a hug or love from somebody or attention or validation. All of that has to go by the wayside, in order to evolve. And that's why you can see here, even with Uranus in Cancer conjunct the South Node, there's virtually really no nurturing that she experienced. The Uranus is the ruler of her North Node, so this experience of having
no nurturing,
really none of that, being void of that. Moon in Taurus, Mars, Venus, and Virgo, balsamic, all the nurturing that she received from the divine,
right,
essentially, which is obviously a far greater experience of unconditional love than any soul could have as a human on earth.
right.
But we are human, and we do have needs and emotional bodies, and it is a very difficult experience to have as you're evolving, no matter how evolved you are. But so that was clearly a part of her journey, to be totally on her own emotionally, even at a very young age. That did occur, and projected upon, people assuming some certain things were happening to her, but because they weren't as evolved, had no clue how magical the things were that were happening to her. So, and this is really an energy, I think, of forgiveness, of forgiving others that don't know what's happening or can't quite understand, and not attaching to what people think really about what they see. And so I think just her essence, her energy, her spirit, and again, you can see this through Jupiter, Mercury being in water houses, in air signs. So this is a spiritual message that's being delivered without saying anything at all. So, love that. I'm looking for one last note here on her. You can see too that there's it looks like a kite pattern from the sun and the moon are the wings of this kite. And the highest point of the kite is the south node. And the bottom of the kite is the north node. You can follow those triangles of energy. And again, her message is that the way to God is through your heart. That is she, when you go to hug her, essentially you go and put your head on her heart, or on her kind of on her chest or her shoulder, really, but it's close to the heart. This is where she'll put her hand on your head and kind of bring you into her heart. And that's the kite pattern, has to do with kind of rising above where you've been. And while the North Node's in Aquarius, which can reflect the trauma, it's returning back to the heart, no matter what the trauma has done, to you, or what you've experienced through it, and helping other people through her message to liberate from their own past through the portal of the heart. That's her message. So, yeah, any last thoughts on her, Deva?
Seeing the sun in the 11th house in Libra, also making that trine to Aquarius in the 3rd, that really speaks to what you were saying too, that to liberate from the past through your heart, that there's a non-attachment there, where there's a way to liberate from the past through doing that, that can create a total transformation and a state of balance. Seeing the sun being in Libra, so it's amazing. It's like it's totally changing the thinking about communication, how to communicate. So it's wow. It's
Well, yeah, I think for sure the communication piece too is you look at the Mercury and Libra ruled by Venus, the way that she's helping other people communicate, to God or to the divine or through spirit is through the song, through the music,
to the
which
music.
everybody can relate to. It doesn't matter how young you are, what stage of evolution you are. And it's just all the walls come down really in a space like that. So anyway, this really again is a first quarter trine more, so it's 7 degrees off that point, but that definitely would apply here. I would say for that first quarter, and that Mercury conjunct Neptune and Saturn means that she's bringing a natural message of connection to God, to the consensus, to the mainstream. I mean, she's been all over the U.S., I know, in major cities, and would end up in like ballrooms of hotels, right? To try and be able to fit all the people that wanted to see her near an
Gosh.
airport, for example. Nothing fancy, right? But like a ballroom just meaning, a place where they might have held weddings or something. And they would decorate it, of course, but and bring all the silks and whatever, the pillows and everything to make it feel like you're, in India, in ways. And other times there'd just be like chairs, literally as far as you can see, lined up, and people sitting in them, and then lines of people out the door waiting just to get a hug from her. So
Gosh.
when you think of hug, what do you think of? What archetype?
Cancer, also Leo.
Yeah, right. So she has Uranus in Cancer on the South Node in Leo, and she's like this universal mother for people. So that Moon in Taurus is part of this kite pattern. It's trining the Sun in Libra, trining the North Node in Aquarius. Which also, when you do get a hug from her, Uranus in Cancer, the energy that you feel, it does feel like you've been plugged into something. It was just like felt like just a vibration because her connection, to God, to Goddess. So Amma, first quarter trine, Jupiter, Mercury, and excuse the typo there. All right, so quite a journey, another journey through the soul's evolutionary roadmap, looking at the phasal relationships between a relationship between Jupiter and Mercury. And this again is how you express yourself, what it is, what do you want to teach, what do you want to say, what do you want to learn, how do you want to grow and expand. You will see this in the signs and the houses that these two planets are in, and the aspects they're making. And we're going to continue along on our journey and come back next time looking at the gibbous phase of Jupiter Mercury. And so check out EA Zoom posts that will let you know about when that's going to be next. And also on my newsletter, if you're not currently getting it, you can sign up for that through my website to find out when the next show for the gibbous phase, the gibbous phase will be aired. And so any last thoughts, Deva, before we go? We've got this website up now too. I think you mentioned some of the things at the beginning of the show, but any other things about that we missed, do you think, on the site?
Let's see.
I'll share if anyone is interested in becoming a more serious student. We do have a correspondence course available. If a lot of this was over your head and you want to get back to the basics and more simple, learn the paradigm, the original course taught by the founder, Jeff Green, is on the website, a correspondence course, and you can purchase that in sections. It comes in 3 sections of 9 DVDs. It's the original course that he taught back in the 90s, and I highly recommend it if you're doing this work. And so also there's a message board on the website if you haven't checked into that, where you can post questions in evolutionary astrology. And when we have threads, you can participate in practice threads there. So thank you so much for joining me again, Deva. And you can contact Deva for a reading or any questions you have for her at her website, devagreen.com. And we'll be back again to share more about the planetary phases and finding your natural voice. Until next time, namaste.